Hello, listeners. Thanks for coming back to hear the third and final installment of the story of Mavra Kundala. If you haven't heard the first two installments, I encourage you to go have a listen. There's so much to know about Terence and his life before Mavra became a part of it. Please enjoy this last segment of Mavra Kundala. Mavra, what kind of name is that? Asked Mr. Pointer one morning over coffee and fried bananas. He didn't know where the bananas came from, but was learning not to ask Mavra because her answers only confused him. The answer to this question was sure to leave him feeling dull-witted as well, and he had kept his curiosity to himself for several days before it finally got the better of him. "It's a misnomer," began Mavra as she easily moved from the stove to the table with her own cup of coffee and plate of fried bananas. Mrs. Peel had never sat at table with Mr. Pointer, and he was not sure he could get used to this woman having breakfast, lunch, dinner with him, but he was trying. He had never seen that coffee cup before, a large brown ceramic mug filled to the brim, steaming, 4 spoons of sugar, slowly stirred as Mavra explained. "My father was a black man. My mother was a white woman. They lived not far from here on a simple farm, ostracized." "Ostracized?" asked Mr. Pointer, but his question was ignored or filed away for future reply. "Ostracized because of their relationship. The local minister would not marry them. The people in town considered my mother a strange bug for wanting to live with a black man, but in the end their love was more powerful than anything people might sling at them. My mother explained to me once after my father disappeared that it was his sexual power that first attracted her, and then his quiet approval that had cemented their union. My mother's parents were Greek, and though she didn't speak that tongue, she gave me a name that would make me aware of who I was, who was responsible for my being. She was secondary, she always insisted, only the glass that one drinks fine wine from. My father was responsible for my conception, my birth, my first years. My father was black, so my mother named me Mavra, which is black in her parents' language. Mavra was far from black, though. Her most important characteristics, her height, her hair, her broad smile, and long fingers, had come from her father. Her skin was toned down by her mother's paleness, milk in the coffee, milk in the chocolate. Her eyes were not black, not brown, not blue, nor green. Her clothing was black, always the long, black, seamless knit garment. Mr. Pointer did not know how many she had, but she always seemed to wear the same one. Her voice was sweet and smooth, always deliciously spiced with that broad, toothy grin. At times it deepened into a rich contralto the further into her past she delved. She talked a great deal about her past in response to Mr. Pointer's questions, but never asked him about his past, almost as if she already knew the details of his origins and had arrived in time to see the results. The results were not flattering. Mr. Pointer was no longer capable of recollection. He was not so old, but he was old enough, and the threads of the delicate spider web that had held his memories together had fallen under the weight of the dewdrops that had accumulated through the years, and had not seen sunshine long enough to evaporate. He had once been young and good-looking, strong and attractive. He had once traveled more hours a day than he took time to rest and rose to begin the road work again. He had once, now he was hard put to remember that which he had once. He was old and gnarled and vacant, confused and confusing, senile. This did not show in his business dealings. He actually had few, now no clients of his own, respected by his managers and sales team for what he had done to make Pointer's soap flakes and the satellite products, the softeners and bluing and bleaches, leaders in the regional market. There were many who were waiting for him to pass on so that the company could finally go national. They knew that as long as he lived, the sales would not extend further than 3 days' journey from his home, an old rule whose time was nearly come. Mavra encouraged him to go to his office daily, though she also warned him to be timely for lunch. "In my house," she had told him, and had repeated on many an occasion, knowing that his memory of current events was fragile. "When one came late for a meal, one went hungry. My daddy was a man of few words. I myself never heard him speak. My mamma ran the house, and her word was law, and that was her law. We were only 3, and we had to stick together," she would tell me, "because no one else would ever stick up for us." "Have you had to wait long for me for lunch, Mavra?" She did not deem it necessary to answer such a question, as it was after 3 in the afternoon. Lunch was now cold river trout with cold baked potatoes with greasy cold melted blue cheese, and her cold look was enough to stop him cold. "I was held up at the factory." "I was held up here at the house," she told him. She turned her back on him and dished the food onto the plate and took it into the dining room that was rarely used and set it at his place and left him alone, went up to her rooms, did not speak directly to him for 3 days, the same number of hours that he had kept her waiting. "There's toast and jam on the counter," she said to the kitchen sink when he came down for breakfast the next morning. "There's a letter for you on the entry table," she said to her cup of coffee when he came home for lunch that same day. "I forgot what time you were expected for dinner," she said to the convention of flies hovering about in the middle of the room when he showed up in the evening, and he had had to heat himself another can of soup, while his mind tried to understand her hostility. Of course it passed, and perhaps it passed so definitely when on the morning of the 4th day, when Mavra made a kissy sound with her lips to call the cat to its breakfast, the cat did not come. Well, that was all right. The cat had run of the entire house, excepting Mavra's rooms, and went out often looking for cute little girl cats to get into fights with. The cat, which was black as the old Negro who had worked for Mr. Flowers, was usually mute, and, like the old black man, had never taken on a name. Mr. Pointer called the cat Little One, because he had found the Tom when it was only a few weeks old, shivering under the front wheel of his car. Mavra tended to call the cat You, and when frustrated, You Black Devil. She did not dislike cats, or this one in particular. She was actually quite fond of You, but she had certain deeply seated ideas about the sharing of the house with an animal. These ideas ranged from the absolute prohibition for You to go up into her rooms. It was clear to Mavra from the hair-ball dust bunnies in the corners and under the bed that either Mrs. Peel had tolerated Yu's presence, or that during the weeks between her death and Mavra's arrival, the door to her annex had been left open. Mavra would not have gray dead hairs clinging to her long black garments. To the kissy sound at mealtime, Mavra did not believe that a cat could not learn correct household behavior, and had taught Yu to wait in the kitchen doorway while she prepared his plate. For a week he was slow to get the message, and usually ate with his head wet from the glass of water Mavra threw at him when he tried to enter before the kissy sound had been given. Basically, to Mavra, people were people and animals were not, and that was that. Mr. Pointer had already noticed Little One's absence, as he had missed the Tom's vibrating warmth at the foot of his bed the night before. When, for the first time in 3 days, Mavra spoke directly to Mr. Pointer, commenting that the cat had not come to breakfast, Mr. Pointer suggested that perhaps the cat had slept out last night, since the past few days had been torturous for him, his smelling girl cats and heat. You Little One Black Devil had found his voice, had roamed the house and garden, making deep, chest-resonating sounds that reverberated in the window panes. Both Mavra and Mr. Pointer suddenly noticed how quiet the house was. Since there was nothing to be done about his disappearance, since they considered it explained, since they realized that the tension hanging between them for 3 days had left them ignoring the cat, they shelved further conversation on the subject until lunchtime. At lunch, for which Mr. Pointer was punctual, and at dinner, for which Mr. Pointer was a few minutes early, the subject was raised again, but not discussed in any more depth than at breakfast. They retired after an hour quietly reading in the living room. That night, Mr. Pointer and Mavra shared a dream. In their dream, they were walking through the town together, arm in arm. One was not leading the other, though in Mr. Pointer's version he sensed the direction coming from Mavra's will. They passed people they knew in the street who greeted them in the way one greets a pair of young people out for a stroll after dinner. Mr. Pointer spoke briefly with his wife, who mentioned that Mrs. Peel was in town. Did he want her to drop by for a visit? Mavra smiled without committing herself to an answer and turned to look about the street while Mr. and Mrs. Pointer exchanged banalities. A few doors down, she noticed something odd on the sidewalk and called Mr. Pointer's attention to what she saw as a little black boy laying in a heap beside a scooter. Mr. Pointer saw a cat, a black cat that could have been Little One, looked as if he had been crushed by a car. They said goodbye to Mrs. Pointer, nodded hellos, and smiled at another couple on the way, and came to a stop where they had each seen something different. Mavra saw that the bundle had been broken open, and spilling out onto the sidewalk were hundreds of white lace doilies, intermingled with sand or lime or soap or something. Mr. Pointer bent down beside the cat, and sure enough, it had been his, dead now. Such a pity. He remarked to Mavra that they must clean up the mess, and when she turned to knock on the door in front of her to ask for a broom, Mr. Pointer walked out of their dream into something that was more of a nightmare. He had moved into the distance and saw the tall silhouette that could only be Mavra. Her eyes glowed as she flashed a smile. In her arms, something moved, something writhed. She held it tight. The blue-green points at the level of her breasts reflected the light. The cat spoke to Mr. Pointer, but, upon waking, he could not remember what had been said. In any case, he began that morning to suspect that Mavra, who always seemed antipathetic towards the cat, must have decided to dispose of him. Him who? Mr. Pointer began to wonder if that him was not only the cat, but Mavra's own master, Mr. Pointer himself. Neither had much of an appetite at breakfast. Mr. Pointer was watching Mavra's face closely as he commented on the continued absence of the cat. Mavra was unconcerned with the cat. The cat was gone. She looked deep into Mr. Pointer's eyes and asked him what he had dreamed that night. Mr. Pointer evaded the question by becoming defensive and asking her what she knew about his dream. "I know a lot about dream, Mr. Pointer. Dream is where we are all of the time. This is dream, Mr. Pointer. Don't you try to fool yourself thinking that you're awake, because you are not awake. You're asleep. When you wake up here, you go to sleep over there. What happened over there last night, Mr. Pointer? Who threw that sack of snow on the sidewalk? Why did you walk away from me? You don't have to spill everything. I already know the first part. You know what happened to me after you took off?" Mr. Pointer began to feel confused. Mavra always spoke in this tone of voice as if she were mesmerizing him into believing that she was talking about something that happened in town the other day. Of course, he didn't know what happened in town to her the other day, and he told her as much in a suspicious tone that reflected his thoughts about the cat and her plans for him. She ignored the tone and went on. "Well, the woman who answered that door was your Mrs. Peel. She told me about your cat, and I was truly sorry to hear the news. Seems some young boy was racing through the street with his car. Your cat was walking from one side of the street to the other. Who knows why he didn't look first? Cats just don't realize what a difficult place they live in when they live among us. He was run down. This morning I took a walk to town and found his crushed little body by the side of the road, and I brought him home and buried him out back under your hammock. So he'll be there when you take your spring nap." What did she mean by a spring nap? Mr. Pointer asked himself. He curtly thanked her for her consideration and took his leave of the breakfast table and worried about his own well-being all the way to the office, where he would spend the better part of the morning trying to locate the letter she had written him to ask for the employment. Mavra found herself covered with the sticky sensation of his fear. She had always been sensitive to the fear of others. From Mavra's girlhood, her mother had tried to hide her fears from her daughter because her daughter always stuck her finger in the wound, twisting it from side to side until the person afraid became exhausted by the fear. Then Mavra would smart-mouth her mother, asking, "See, what a stupid thing to be afraid of." She only got away with it because she was always right. Mavra learned to be discreet with her perception as she grew up, didn't force people to face their own fears anymore, but that self-control didn't stop her from suddenly sweating thickly, smelling the odor of her reaction, goose pimples on her upper arms and the back of her neck, pushing the sparse hairs erect. Mr. Pointer was afraid of something, that was sure, but she couldn't say what. He had to say it, and she couldn't make him. That evening, Mr. Pointer had his own private dream. He was old, so very old. He was with people he knew. Maybe they were family, maybe they were friends. He could not say because there were no images, only the sounds. Seemed like they were in a bar or a restaurant. There were sounds of plates clanking and the smell of beer and smoke and coffee and fried food. Maybe it was a celebration, maybe a wedding or a birthday. It was June. His birthday was in June. Maybe it was his birthday. He reached. Someone put a cool glass in his hand. He could hear the tinkle of the ice, feel the drips of condensation fall upon his leg. Now they were helping him out of the bar, one slow, painful step after another. He leaned on his cane and heard someone address him.
"Grandpa."
He did not know who that woman's voice belonged to. They came to the door. Someone tried to take his hand. It was painfully difficult for him to keep his balance. The people around him laughed good-naturedly, and he joined them, knowing that he was the butt of their joke. As he passed by the window, he felt the eyes of an innocent observer brush the tear from his cheek. He did not awaken at once, for he had had a stroke in his sleep. Mr. Pointer was rich, could manage having a nurse while counting on Mavra for his homey comforts. That fateful morning that he did not come down to the kitchen for breakfast, that first time that she entered his room in the front of the house to find him twisted in the bedclothes, breathing shallowly and reaching with his outstretched left arm stiff as a fence post, that hurried, pressured walk to the center of town to ride back to the house in the physician's automobile, that death sentence that did not come to fruit, that week feeding him like a baby while he slobbered strange accusations through his semi-paralyzed lips. "You killed him! You killed my little one, and only because he left hairs about, and now you're going to kill me. I don't know why. Why are you killing me? I've done nothing wrong to you. What do you want? I know you want me dead. Well, I won't give you the satisfaction." That interview with the nurse, that big-boned woman who occupied herself with Mr. Pointer's bowel movements and feeding times and physical therapy, she threw him around like a rag doll, and he fell into bed exhausted with a look of hate for Mavra when she brought him his tea. That last memory of Mavra's mother when she died. Mavra was young, maybe only 20. Her father had gone missing years earlier. They were alone in the small house, Mavra sitting in a straight-backed chair beside her mother's bed. The woman, propped by pillowcases filled with old rags, was young as well, maybe only 40, but her life had been hard, had never been meant to be long. She had a fever. Mavra mopped the sweat from her face and neck and breasts with a cool, damp cloth soaked in chamomile. The room was filled with the rich incense of golden seal flowers that would keep her mother's lungs clear. Mavra alternated between holding the glass with eucalyptus tea for her mother to drink and the glass into which her mother coughed up blood. They did not speak. There were no deathbed confessions or final regrets or wise advice. The woman who had brought Mavra to life simply died, not even in mid-cough, holding her daughter's chocolate bar fingers, squeezing tightly and never releasing the grip, even as she slipped into her next world. Mavra sat with that warm, then cool, then cold grip on her hand for 3 days, and only left the room when a neighbor discovered them. So for her it was not strange what she did when Mr. Pointer finally, against his own will, died. Despite the rough treatment of that nurse and his growing hate and fear of Mavra, he had managed to recuperate a certain amount of mental timing. He was unable to walk. His entire paralyzed left side made him resemble a top-heavy boat on a stormy sea, but he could almost think again, and thought that the best thing he could do to recuperate was to dismiss the abusive nurse and put Mavra to work, pushing him in his wheelchair to his office in town, where he took up the reins of his soap empire through long and heated telephone conversations. Mavra would come back in the afternoon to pick him up and take him home, and one day, upon returning home, she found the man in the wheelchair dead. The next day she walked into town alone, leaving Mr. Pointer sitting as he had been the previous afternoon in his wheelchair, and informed his office that he was taken ill again and would not be returning to work. Now, one may well ask how she kept his corpse from rotting and stinking during the years that she pushed him about the streets in his wheelchair, and the answer would not be believed. One may well ask why no one seemed to notice that the old man never spoke, never greeted his neighbors when she took him out for an evening stroll, while Mavra nodded to them with her toothy grin. As well, no one would wonder what ever happened to Mavra. No one noticed she was gone until she was gone. No one noticed that Mr. Pointer likewise had disappeared until such had passed. And the answer would be equally hard to swallow. What had actually happened to that cat?
You're listening to Radio Revel. Listen, like, subscribe, and share.